I'm the amateur logician. In this journey together, let's take a look at Mortimer J. Adler's book, 10 Philosophical Mistakes. Little errors in the beginning lead to large problems in the end. Mortimer J. Adler asks us to consider the relation of the human mind to the senses and to ideas. For Plato, Aristotle, and many contemporary philosophers, we apprehend objects that are both sensible and intelligible. We can perceive, imagine, and remember. That's the sensible faculty. But also, we can understand, judge, and reason. That's the intellectual faculty. So we apprehend two distinct things, the sensible and purely intellectual, and hence our minds have two distinct powers. However, philosophers like Hobbes, Berkeley, and Hume thought of the mind as a purely sensible faculty. This is what leads David Hume to argue that we don't know what it really means to be a triangle. That's because we cannot conceive of a triangle in a general sense. For example, we cannot conceive of a triangle in the imagination that's neither equilateral, isosceles, nor scalene. It's going to be one of those three things, but because it's one of those three, it cannot be a triangle in a general sense, in a universal sense. So, all we can be aware of is particular triangles. We have the general term triangle, but we don't have a general idea about triangularity. David Hume ends up in what's called nominalism. But one of the problems here is that Hume is equating an understanding of triangularity with a mental picture of a triangle. These, however, are not identical. Moreover, nominalism is self-defeating, or so argued Mortimer J. Adler. How can we have a general term or word triangle? Can we apprehend what is common to the entities that we label under the word triangle? If the nominalist answers no, they will have undermined any explanation they give for how common names are applicable. And if the nominalist answers yes, then arguably, it seems, they're going to have to implicitly repudiate their position at the end of the day. Even if somebody argues that something only resembles a triangle, and that's it, resemblance itself is a universal. There's no escaping it. To step back, a general question in the history of philosophy has been, are distinct individual members of the same kind by virtue of sharing a universal? For example, I look out the window and see a lot of human beings. They are all distinct, but they are all humans because they share in the universal nature of being human. That is, they share in the properties of being rational animals and so forth. Likewise, triangles share a common pattern or basic properties, making them triangles and not something else. These universal common patterns or basic properties are called abstract because we can think about them apart from these particular distinct individual things. You and I never encounter triangularity as such, nor do we encounter human nature as such. We instead encounter particular triangles and particular human beings. And these particular things only imperfectly approximate the abstract universal notions. That's because we never meet a perfect triangle, so to speak, or a perfectly rational animal, so to speak. Mortimer Adler writes, "Suffice it is to say that intelligible universals of conceptual thought are public in the same way that the sensible particulars of perception are public," end quote. We're not, in other words, locked into our own minds. That there are universal natures, universal patterns to objectively discover in the world allow us to enter into dialogue with each other about the world around us. We exist in a common universe. You and I can go to a coffee shop. Both of us are aware of a table and 2 coffee cups in front of us. We'll see the sensible objects, and we're also in the position to have shared ideas. This allows us to meaningfully communicate with each other about tables, coffee cups, and other things. We could even talk about triangles and human nature. In contrast, if everything is only particular, how can we talk about triangles or human nature at all? How can we understand each other at all? It's only because some form of realism, of accepting universals, must be true. Ideas are that by which we understand. Ideas are means to understand. Our immediate awareness is over the table, 2 coffee cups, and each other. If, on the contrary, we were only aware of our own private perceptions and our own private ideas in our own respective minds, then we couldn't be sure there's any table, coffee cups, or persons in the universe that corresponded to our private perceptions and private ideas. And we couldn't be sure we were understanding each other during communication. We couldn't even be sure that both of us really existed. We'd be locked in our own mind. But we're not locked into our own minds. Our minds are directed outwardly, not inwardly. That's, in part, what blocks radical skeptical conclusions. Finally, we can talk about universal ideas without reference to sensible particulars. That's because our mind is not limited to sensible powers. For example, we can talk about triangles in general without referring to a particular triangle we see in front of us at the coffee shop. There's no need to. Such allows us, moreover, to prove the Pythagorean theorem is true for all Euclidean right-angled triangles. This ability of abstraction to reach a universal idea like triangularity is thereby categorically different than our sensible abilities that deal with particulars, not universals. By abstraction, we focus our minds to find out what's common to something, or we can focus our minds to patterns that we might be able to mathematically model. Adler goes so far to argue that this ability to abstract makes us human beings different in kind, not merely degree, from mere animals. Our mind doesn't only have sensible powers, but also intellectual powers of abstraction. We are not mere animals. We can reason. We can go beyond our mere senses. Universals can be reached. Laws of nature can be discovered. Mathematical models can be created, and so on and so forth. Notice that little errors in the beginning lead to larger problems in the end. And that includes thinking that the human ability to think is not much different than a mere animal.